No one expected it to happen. Karoline Leavitt, the youthful face of the MAGA movement, publicly challenged the glittering legacy of former President Barack Obama, a figure celebrated by the media for over a decade. It happened live, on the broadcast of the talk show American Forum. What seemed like a casual conversation quickly turned into something far more charged. Within minutes, the audience realized this wasn't a dialogue. It was an ideological clash. Karoline didn't come to chat. She came ready for battle. Facing her that evening was Michelle Obama, former First Lady, a symbol of elegance and progress, who had inspired millions through her initiatives like Let's Move and her best-selling memoir, Becoming. Michelle took the stage with the confidence of someone who had shaped American culture. Every word she spoke carried the weight of her legacy, one built on hope, diversity, and social justice. But Karoline didn't target Michelle personally. She went straight for the policies Michelle represented, from Obamacare to education, reform, what she called a dream detached from America's working families. Within minutes, it became a clash of two eras. On one side, a legacy painted with inspirational speeches and progressive policies. On the other, a new generation determined to strip away the polished image of the past. That night, even Michelle Obama seemed to feel the final barrier of her husband's legacy waver under the force of an unrelenting opponent. The stage at American Forum was alive with tension. Applause and boos echoed through the auditorium as banners waved. On one side, MAGA supporters held signs proclaiming "Protect our kids," while Democrats hoisted placards reading "Love is all." Laura Bennett, the veteran host, stepped forward in a sleek dark suit, commanding the room with her calm presence and professional smile. "Welcome to American Forum, where we come together to discuss the issues shaping our nation's future," she announced. "Tonight, we dive into one of the most controversial topics: culture and identity." The first subject was sex education, transgender rights, and what some call wokeness. The spotlight turned to Michelle Obama, who sat with grace and poise. "America is strong because of its diversity," she began, her voice warm and persuasive. "Comprehensive education doesn't just teach knowledge, it teaches compassion. We must protect the vulnerable, not push them to the margins." Her words earned applause from the Democratic side, while MAGA supporters stirred with murmurs of dissent. Then it was Karoline Leavitt's turn. She sat upright, her blonde hair gleaming under the lights, her eyes fixed and intense. She stood slowly, silence filling the room. "Mrs. Obama, you speak of compassion," she began, her tone cool and controlled. "But ask the parents in Iowa or Georgia, do they want their kids learning confusing gender concepts instead of math?" She described a parent in Missouri whose 11-year-old son was forced to choose pronouns. "That's not compassion, that's imposition." The MAGA crowd erupted in cheers. Michelle furrowed her brow, preparing to respond, but Karoline pressed on. "Why don't you mention the kids mocked for holding their family's beliefs, or the coach in Arizona fired for not using new pronouns? Who do you choose, Mrs. Obama? The kids or the activists?" It was a piercing moment, the kind that turns a debate into a battleground. Michelle took a deep breath. "Karoline, you're twisting the truth," she said, tension tightening her voice. "Education is about opening minds, not dividing. I've seen kids find strength when they're accepted. We need unity, not fear." Her words drew applause, but it was faint against the building roar from the opposing side. Karoline wasn't finished. Her voice rose, laced with sarcasm. "You call forcing 9-year-olds to learn about gender identity opening minds?" She cited Pew Research, saying 65% of American parents want schools focused on academics, not ideology. "They're not the enemy, Mrs. Obama. They're raising kids. Are you with them or with the corporations pushing wokeness?" "Parents first," the MAGA crowd chanted, banners waving. Michelle tried to stay firm. "You're stoking division," she replied. "I don't represent corporations. I represent those pushed to the margins, those who need to be heard. Education offers understanding. She turned to the audience for support, but the applause was subdued, nearly drowned out by boos. Karoline saw her moment. A chance? She said, mocking Michelle's words. Who are you giving a chance to? The activists writing textbooks? Or the workers left behind? She cited a Nevada teacher fired for refusing to teach fourth graders about transgender issues. You call that justice, Mrs. Obama? Michelle was momentarily stunned. The tension cracked the air as Laura Bennett jumped in, her voice sharp with urgency. Mrs. Obama, Miss Leavitt has raised a big issue. How do you respond? The spotlight bore down on Michelle as if exposing every weakness. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. I believe in dialogue, she said, her voice deliberate. We can protect kids and respect diversity. I've seen schools unite when people listen to each other. But her words lacked force, overshadowed by Leavitt's onslaught. Leavitt turned to the audience, raising her hand like an orator conquering the crowd. Americans are fed up with wokeness forced on their kids, she declared, her voice resounding. According to Rasmussen reports, 70% of voters want schools to teach skills, not ideology. Mrs. Obama, do you hear their voices? Or are you too caught up with the DC elite? The final line was a blade, cutting deep into Michelle's stance. The MAGA crowd exploded, shouts of, Karoline, echoing through the room. The stage lights dimmed, but the studio atmosphere remained molten, like a furnace. Laura Bennett stepped forward, the light casting her shadow like a blade across the stage. The studio quieted, but still burned like embers, waiting to be reignited. She scanned the crowd, her gaze cutting through the undercurrents. Thank you for those candid, profound, and emotional insights about how we shape who we are and who gets to rewrite those stories, she said, her voice low but resonant, like metal beneath each word. But identity isn't just personal, it's also shaped by what's prioritized and what's left behind in the national budget. She paused, letting the stifling air grow heavier. The light now framed Michelle Obama's face, highlighting her sculpted calm. From Obamacare to community programs, the Trump administration is making deep cuts. Mrs. Obama, as someone who stood at the heart of these policies, what do you think of this direction? Michelle's gaze swept the audience, seeking connection. Government spending isn't just numbers, she began, her voice low and weighty. It's about people's stories. I met a single mother in Detroit whose son got heart treatment because of Obamacare. These programs are a safety net for millions of Americans. Cutting them means turning our backs on those who need help most, Praning turned to Leavitt, her eyes inviting a counterstrike. Karoline, Mrs. Obama just defended the Obamacare legacy. Your response? Leavitt, in a navy dress, sat upright, her eyes gleaming with cold confidence. She paused, letting the audience feel the pressure, then stood, stepping forward with the stride of a warrior ready to land a blow. Mrs. Obama, you tell touching stories, she began, her voice smooth but laced with mockery. But let's talk reality. Obamacare raised insurance costs by 25% for middle-class families, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. I met an electrician in Pennsylvania working 60 hours a week but unable to afford insurance because of your regulations. You call that a safety net? The MAGA crowd roared, their applause crashing like waves. Michelle prepared to respond, but Leavitt gave her no chance. Look at the numbers, she continued, her voice rising like a prosecutor delivering a verdict. Obamacare added $1.7 trillion to the budget deficit since 2010, according to the Congressional Budget Office. While you tell stories about a mother in Detroit, millions of other Americans are struggling with higher taxes and fees. The Trump administration is cutting wasteful programs to give money back to workers. What do you say to them? The question was a dagger, stabbing straight into Michelle's argument. Michelle took a breath, her gaze steady but tinged with tension. Karoline, you focus on numbers and ignore people, she replied, her voice calm but sharper. Obamacare isn't perfect, but it insured 20 million people who had nothing. I met a veteran in Atlanta treated for cancer because of this program. Cutting it strips away their chance to live. We need to improve, not dismantle. She looked directly at the audience, trying to rekindle empathy. Leavitt didn't let Michelle gain ground. She tilted her head, a mocking smile flickering. Improve, she echoed, her voice dropping, laced with contempt. You call bankrupting millions of families with insurance fees improvement? According to the Heritage Foundation, 40% of Americans had to borrow money to cover health care costs under Obamacare. I know a family in Wisconsin who lost their home because they couldn't afford medical bills. Mrs. Obama, do you tell them that's a chance to live? Michelle's gaze sharpened. Karoline, you're distorting the truth, she said, her voice firm. Obamacare has saved millions of lives. Cutting it isn't the solution. We need smart investments, reforming the system to lower costs. I've seen communities grow stronger when people are cared for. Leavitt smiled as if she'd anticipated every move. Smart investments, she countered, her voice soaring, dripping with sarcasm. You call pouring trillions into inefficient programs smart? According to the Cato Institute, 30% of Obamacare spending is wasted on bureaucracy. Meanwhile, Trump cut taxes, boosted jobs, and returned $2.5 trillion to Americans, per the Treasury Department. Mrs. Obama, do you want workers to keep paying for your failed dreams? The question landed like a punch, leaving Michelle stunned. The MAGA audience stood, their applause like thunder. Laura interjected, her voice charged with excitement. Mrs. Obama, Ms. Leavitt just brought strong numbers. How do you respond? The spotlight again bore down on Michelle. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. I believe in an America that cares for each other, she said, her voice deliberate. Obamacare was a start. We can improve. Cutting it isn't the answer. It's abandoning responsibility. But her words lacked force, overshadowed once more by Leavitt's onslaught. Leavitt didn't stop. She turned to the audience, raising her hand like an orator conquering the crowd. Americans don't want bloated programs lining bureaucrats' pockets, she declared, her voice resounding. According to the Reason Foundation, 60% of voters support cutting government spending to lower taxes. Trump listens to them. Mrs. Obama doesn't. Are you with the workers or with bureaucratic dreams? The final line was another blade, cutting deep into Michelle's stance. The MAGA crowd erupted again, shouts of Karoline echoing through the studio. Leavitt sat down, her gaze icy, like a warrior who'd landed a second blow. Michelle, though still composed, felt the mounting pressure. The ideological battle was tilting toward Leavitt, and the stage was hotter than ever. Laura Bennett stood at the stage's center like a flame, yet to choose which way to burn. She sat as a steadfast pillar amid a raging storm. The lights highlighted her face, accentuating the sharp, commanding presence of a host navigating one of the fiercest debates on television today. Without shouting or exaggerating, with just a glance and a well-timed pause, she held the pulse of the entire room. She leaned slightly forward, her voice lowering, as if drawing the audience closer. The question is, after all the arguments, the differences, and the clashes, what is the true mark a president leaves on this nation? She paused, her gaze shifting to Michelle Obama, then sweeping across the audience. Is legacy about numbers, policy changes, or something deeper, something that touches the soul of a nation? The studio fell into a tense silence, taut as a bowstring. Mrs. Obama, please. Michelle gently adjusted her beige silk dress, her eyes seeking empathy from the audience. Her voice was warm and emotional as she began. Our legacy is a journey of overcoming. We inherited a nation broken by a financial crisis. We created 14 million jobs, saved the auto industry, and brought Obamacare to millions who were desperate. She spoke of a farmer in Iowa who said his family no longer feared bankruptcy from illness because of their work. That's a legacy of unity and hope. The Democratic side erupted in applause, some holding up signs reading, "Obama is pride." But boos from the MAGA crowd quickly cut in, as if to snuff out every spark. The host turned to Leavitt, her eyes inviting a response. Karoline, Mrs. Obama just defended her legacy. How do you respond? Leavitt, her blonde hair gleaming under the lights, sat upright, eyes flashing with confidence. She paused, letting silence envelop the room and hold the MAGA audience in suspense. Then she stood, striding to the center of the stage with a commanding presence. Her gaze locked onto Michelle's like a strategist ready to strike. Mrs. Obama, you talk about unity, she began, her voice smooth but laced with biting sarcasm. But ask the coal miners in West Virginia who lost their jobs under your administration. Did they feel hope? She told of a miner in Kentucky who saw only factory closures and mounting bills during the Obama years. You call that a legacy? Michelle opened her mouth, but Leavitt gave her no chance, charging forward without pause like a cavalryman storming an opening in enemy lines. Let's look at reality, Leavitt said, her voice ringing out like a bell in the fiery auditorium. She wasn't just speaking, she was performing. Under Obama, average GDP growth was just 1.8%, according to the Commerce Department. Trump hit 3.1% before the pandemic and created over 6.5 million jobs in his first 3 years. She stepped toward the stands, raising her hand as if to seal the truth. Trump slashed thousands of regulations, saving businesses over $200 billion. Facts from the Council of Economic Advisors. Not words, but results. Not hope, but action. Then she spun back to face Michelle. So tell me, Mrs. Obama, with all those numbers, do you still want Americans to believe your legacy is the superior one? The question hit like a missile. The 5D studio erupted. The MAGA section exploded with cheers, blazing red banners waving, chants thundering, Trump, Trump. Amid the flickering lights, Michelle remained silent, her eyes tracking Leavitt like a chess master calculating the next move. She took a deep breath, her expression calm but tense. She leaned toward the microphone, her voice rising, composed and sharp. Karoline, you're distorting the truth, she said, each word striking with the weight of iron. When we entered the White House, the country was on the brink of collapse, the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. We didn't just stop the disaster. We saved millions of jobs and rebuilt from the ashes. Her gaze swept the room. She shared the story of a construction worker in Oregon who, thanks to their stimulus policies, could feed his family, have insurance, and hope. The foundation Mr. Trump inherited was the recovery we bled to achieve. Silence. Leavitt leaned forward, a mocking smile flickering like a blade. Inherited? She repeated, her tone lighting up like a spark. You call adding $9 trillion to the national debt laying a foundation? She cited the Office of Management and Budget, noting that over 4 million people fell into poverty under Obama. Her voice lowered, but its intensity deepened. And Trump? He didn't just create jobs. He brought unemployment down to 3.4%, the lowest in half a century, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. She turned to the audience, arms outstretched like a judge. I met a bakery owner in Georgia. Thanks to Trump's tax cuts, she hired more staff and expanded her business. That's reality, not ideals. And you tell them your legacy is about unity? The final blow landed like a spear. The MAGA crowd erupted again. Trump Saves America flags raised high, a red wave flooding the stage with thunderous chants. Michelle clenched her hands but didn't back down. Karoline, you're trying to tell half the story, she said, her voice firm, each word meshing like gears. You forget context. We didn't just rebuild the economy, we tried to build a fairer, more inclusive America where no one is left behind. She paused. Then, slowly and decisively, she added, Obamacare, though not perfect, saved millions of lives. That's our legacy, not just numbers, people. The Democratic audience stirred, applause surging like a revived heartbeat. Leavitt smiled, as if she'd anticipated every word. "Fairness?" she shot back, voice soaring with mockery. "You call raising taxes on the middle class fairness?" She cited the tax foundation. Obama's policies added $500 billion in taxes on workers. Trump, on the other hand, cut $1.5 trillion in taxes. Taxes were putting money back into 85% of families, according to the IRS. A nurse in Arizona even said that thanks to Trump, she was able to buy her first home. Then came the sharp question, "Mrs. Obama, do you want future generations to bear the debt of your legacy?" It hit like a punch, leaving Michelle momentarily stunned. The MAGA crowd erupted in thunderous applause, while some disheartened Democratic spectators began leaving their seats. Laura turned toward Michelle, her voice sharpened with excitement, asking if she had a response to Leavitt's powerful numbers. Stage lights bore down on Michelle like an interrogation. She took a breath, trying to reclaim her composure. Her voice was measured. "A legacy isn't just about numbers or the economy," she said. "A legacy is about building a nation where everyone is respected, where they have a chance to succeed regardless of race or background. We did that, and I'm proud of what we achieved." She stood firm, her expression resolute. Leavitt stepped forward, undeterred, her confidence radiating. She raised her hand to the crowd like a victor. "Americans don't want a legacy of debt and failure," she declared. According to Rasmussen reports, 62% of voters say Trump delivered a stronger economy than Obama. Trump built a thriving America. Mrs. Obama left a depleted nation. It's time we face the truth. She paused and smiled coldly. "Which legacy do you choose?" Tension gripped the studio. Emotions blazed across the audience like wildfire. Laura Bennett stood centered, her expression steady, as if conducting the energy of the room. She addressed Michelle again, inviting her to respond to the stark facts. All lights focused on Michelle, casting sharp shadows across her features, exposing every flicker of tension. The air was tight with anticipation. Michelle stood, her hands lightly gripping her beige silk dress, scanning the crowd. She began slowly, her voice low, straining to hold steady. "Immigration is the soul of America," she said. "We built a nation where everyone has a chance. I met an immigrant family in California who worked hard so their children could go to college. Deportation. Orders are tearing these families apart. That's a betrayal of the values we've always cherished. We need humane reform, not oppression." She paused, waiting for support, but the applause from Democrats was faint and scattered. The MAGA boos were loud and swift, crashing over her like a wave. Laura turned again to Leavitt, inviting her counter. Leavitt was ready. Her expression sharp, she walked to center stage, locking eyes with Michelle. "You talk about the soul of America," she began, "but have you heard of Sarah Root? A 21-year-old from Nebraska, killed by an illegal immigrant. I met her mother. She got no justice from this administration. You call that values?" Michelle readied to respond, but Leavitt continued without pause. "Illegal immigration costs $116 billion a year, according to the Federation for American Immigration Reform. While you talk about one family, millions are paying the price. Trump is protecting them." "Mrs. Obama, whose side are you on?" The MAGA crowd erupted, chanting "Borders! Borders!" as if to drown Michelle out completely. Hashtags like Leavitt Slays started trending online. Michelle breathed deeply, holding steady. "Karoline, you use pain to divide," she replied. "Immigration isn't black and white. I met an immigrant doctor in Texas who saved hundreds during the pandemic. Deportation orders don't discriminate. They're tearing communities apart. We need a fair system, not violence." She turned to the audience, searching for empathy, but Democratic applause barely broke through the noise. Leavitt pounced again. "Fair?" she echoed mockingly. "You call letting 2 million illegal immigrants cross the border each year fair? Customs and Border Protection says 70% are linked to crime. I met a police officer in Arizona attacked by one. Mrs. Obama, do you tell him that's community? Her words hit like a blow. The MAGA crowd rose, shouting and waving "Protect America" banners. The volume and force of their support seemed to rock Michelle. Some Democrats in the studio bowed their heads, unable to face the moment's weight. Defeat spread through the room. Michelle tried to regain her footing, but the resolve in her eyes wavered. "Karoline, you exaggerate to sow fear," she said, her voice firmer now, though still unable to mask her disadvantage. "Most immigrants are hard-working people who contribute greatly to this country. We need reform to protect them and maintain security. I've seen communities stand strong when we work together." She turned back, hoping to rally support from the audience, but only a small corner clapped, their sound faint under the loud MAGA boos. The growing opposition visibly shook her, as though every effort she made was dissolving in the thick tension of the moment. Leavitt smiled, as if she had anticipated every move. "Community," she countered, her voice soaring and dripping with mockery. "You call letting cities like Chicago drown in crime a community? According to the Justice Department, 40% of violent crime in major cities is linked to illegal immigrants. Trump is cleaning up that mess while Mrs. Obama defends failed policies. I met a mother in New Mexico who lost her son in a crash caused by an illegal immigrant. Mrs. Obama, do you want her to believe in your reform?" The question landed like a punch. Michelle was stunned. The MAGA audience rose to their feet, their applause thunderous. Some Democratic spectators began leaving their seats, their disillusionment apparent. Laura interjected, "Mrs. Obama, Miss Leavitt just made a powerful argument. How do you respond?" The spotlight felt like it was burning through Michelle, exposing every doubt. She drew a breath, collecting herself. "I believe in a compassionate America," she said slowly, her tone careful. "We can secure the border without tearing families apart. Reform is the right path." But her words lacked the power they needed, struggling to rise above Leavitt's onslaught. The Democrats offered a few claps, but the MAGA crowd roared on. Leavitt didn't miss a beat. "Americans want safety, not empty promises," she declared. According to the Center for Immigration Studies, 75% of voters support deporting illegal immigrants. Trump listens to them. Mrs. Obama doesn't. Which values do you choose? Laura Bennett stood center stage, her gaze sharp. She looked at Michelle, then turned to Leavitt. "Karoline, Mrs. Obama showed remarkable resilience, but it's clear tonight this confrontation has been decided. What do you have to say about your victory?" Leavitt's eyes shone with resolve. A faint but confident smile appeared. "Thank you, Laura. Tonight, I just want to say one thing. Americans need bold decisions, not empty words. I stand here not just to defend my values, but for the values the American people truly want. Safety, strength, and a secure future. I'll keep fighting for them." Her words landed like a declaration of war. The MAGA crowd erupted again, their cheers thunderous, relentless. Michelle stood silently, unable to offer more. The audience had found its victor. Leavitt, with her command of the crowd and her sharpened rhetoric, had seized the moment completely. As the lights dimmed, the stage remained lit by the fervent applause of her supporters. Backstage, a different scene played out. Karoline Leavitt, her blonde hair still gleaming under the dimming stage lights, walked into the green room like a boxer fresh from a knockout. The MAGA team swarmed around her, hugs and laughter echoing through the space. "You did it, Karoline," an aide said. Leavitt smiled, pride flickering through her usually icy demeanor. Her phone buzzed. She raised a hand, signaling silence, then pressed the speaker button. "Karoline, you're a warrior," Donald Trump's voice boomed through. "You showed them how strong MAGA is. America's proud of you." "Thank you, sir," she replied smoothly. "Mr. President, this is for the American people, not the elites." Applause broke out again in the green room, fists raised, chants of MAGA swelling. A Truth Social post went viral within minutes. Karoline Leavitt just taught the world a lesson in MAGA strength. Tremendous. Meanwhile, Michelle Obama sat in a quiet corner backstage, dim light casting long shadows across her face. Her usual poise had given way to a visible weariness. An aide stood beside her, offering quiet words of comfort. "You did well, ma'am. Leavitt just played dirty." Michelle shook her head gently, her voice low. "She was sharper than I thought. She knows how to hit the crowd's emotions." She held a glass of water, her fingers trembling faintly, as if still reacting to the pressure of the stage. Nearby, a Democratic journalist whispered to a colleague. Michelle was caught off guard. Leavitt destroyed her. In the hallway, reporters crowded around Leavitt. A Newsmax journalist pushed forward, microphone in hand. "Karoline, how do you feel after dominating Michelle Obama?" Leavitt, standing tall, smiled confidently. "I didn't come to fight a person. I came to defend Americans, the ones forgotten by Obama's failed policies. Tonight, we spoke the truth." Cheers rang out. Supporters waved "Karoline is the future" banners. A viral post declared, "Karoline Leavitt just tore apart the Obama legacy. MAGA Queen." Thousands of shares followed. Comments lit up. Michelle Obama didn't stand a chance. Michelle declined interviews. She left through a private exit, avoiding the cameras. An aide trailed behind her, holding a phone filled with critical social media posts. Michelle glanced at it, then looked away, her expression momentarily faltering. A Democratic commentator nearby sighed. She wasn't ready for this kind of fight. Leavitt was ruthless. Outside, some Democratic supporters tried to defend Michelle, but their voices were quickly drowned out by the chanting crowd. "Karoline! Karoline!" Backstage, the media swarmed around Leavitt. Conservative journalists angled their cameras, recording her every word. "Mrs. Obama represents a bygone era," Leavitt declared on camera, her voice cutting and sure. "Americans want action, not empty promises. Trump and I are delivering that." A reporter asked, "Do you think you changed the political game was on full display tonight." Karoline Leavitt smiled, her eyes flashing with confidence as she declared that Americans had seen who was truly fighting for them. The MAGA crowd erupted in applause, some holding up phones to live stream the moment. Online, the hashtag #LeavittSlays dominated, with viral posts like "Karoline just burned Michelle Obama to the ground, MAGA reigns." Meanwhile, in a quieter corner, a group of Democratic journalists huddled, trying to analyze Michelle Obama's loss. "She was led by Leavitt from the start," one whispered. "Leavitt knew how to use data and stories to hit people's hearts." A Democratic account attempted damage control, insisting Michelle was still an icon, though accusing Leavitt of playing dirty. But the response was quickly overwhelmed by a surge of MAGA supporters. "No excuses. Karoline won," one post read. Conservative commentators summed it up near the exit. "This is a historic moment. Leavitt demolished the Obama legacy in front of millions." In a small press room, Leavitt fielded interviews, every word reinforcing her victory. "I'm not here to boast," she said with calm authority. "I'm here to speak for the forgotten Americans, those left behind by Mrs. Obama and her legacy." When asked if she had a message for Michelle Obama, she looked straight into the camera. Her smile turned razor sharp. "I respect her, but her time is over. America belongs to those who act." Cheers erupted from the hallway. Supporters waved. "Karoline unbeatable" banners. Michelle had already left the studio, sitting in the back of a car, staring out the window. An aide quietly read a Truth Social post aloud. "Karoline Leavitt is the MAGA flame, and Obama is ashes." Michelle didn't answer. She simply sighed, knowing this wasn't just a personal defeat. It was a blow to her husband's legacy. Leavitt's sharpness and relentless drive had turned American Forum into a political battlefield, and she had emerged as the victor. In the hours following the debate, the media storm exploded. Michelle faced unprecedented criticism. Social media was relentless. "Michelle got crushed by Leavitt," one post said, racking up thousands of likes. Once viewed as an unassailable Democratic flag bearer, Michelle now faced a fractured base. An MSNBC commentator lamented, she wasn't ready for this kind of attack. Public speaking engagements were quietly canceled. Aid reports suggested Michelle was retreating from politics, possibly to write a new book. Her once shining influence dimmed before the rise of a new conservative generation. Truth Social posts mocked her fall. Michelle Obama learned her lesson. Don't mess with MAGA. Meanwhile, Leavitt's star blazed across conservative media. Fox News, Newsmax, and others rushed to book her. On a live broadcast, she declared, "I fight for the forgotten Americans, and tonight they were heard." The ripple effects shook the political landscape. Democrats argued among themselves. Some blamed Michelle's lack of strategy. Others demanded a new face to take on MAGA. In contrast, Leavitt became a symbol of conservative strength. Young MAGA groups organized Karoline night events, waving banners and quoting her debate lines. A conservative journalist on Breitbart wrote, "Leavitt changed the game, proving MAGA is the future." She hadn't just beaten Michelle Obama, she had carved her name into the history of American politics. At 27, she became a standard-bearer for the MAGA movement, even discussed as a potential Trump successor. Posts celebrated her with lines like, "Karoline is the future, MAGA forever, unbeatable." At conservative conferences, she delivered fiery speeches that electrified audiences. One Newsmax commentator put it plainly, "Leavitt redefined politics, sharp, fierce, and fearless." Across America, young women looked up to her. From college campuses to small-town gatherings, Women for Karoline groups sprang up, hosting workshops and promoting civic engagement. A student in Texas posted, "Karoline made me believe I can change this country. Leavitt didn't." Just inspire a generation of young women. She re-energized a conservative movement focused on working-class Americans. Her blend of personal stories and data-driven messaging struck a deep chord with ordinary voters. Her calm confidence and sharp intellect made her an essential voice of the MAGA movement and a rising force in national politics. She now sets her sights on even higher office, steadfast in her mission to put America's people first. The story of Karoline Leavitt officially shuts down Obama underscores the stark political divide in America. Debates are no longer mere exchanges of ideas. They are fierce ideological confrontations. Over 4 intense rounds on American Forum, Leavitt's precision and emotional resonance overwhelmed Michelle Obama, a symbol of progressive legacy. This moment reflects a broader shift in American politics, where new conservative voices challenge entrenched icons amid deep divisions over culture, economy, and immigration. Leavitt's victory, magnified by social media and energized MAGA supporters, showcases the power of narrative and emotional connection in modern persuasion. Her success came from understanding her audience, hitting both heart and head. Michelle, graceful but less agile in this new arena, couldn't match the pace. In today's polarized world, success comes not just from ideals, but from the ability to connect, respond, and fight strategically. Americans, whether on stage, at work, or online, can learn to engage both passionately and respectfully. This ideological battlefield is the new normal, and Karoline Leavitt just proved she's ready for it.